Hi, my name is Ken Lasterson. I wrote a microbiome prescription website. Also, I'm a long-term statistician, taught AI, a bunch of other things. Very much a technical numbers nerd. And what I want to do is I want to walk through my odds ratio snapshots to do a little bit of background explanation uh, because some of the results are, for many people, going to be, wait a minute, this must be wrong, this must be wrong. I want to go through and explain how in the world I got there. And I have to also thank some of my profs on University of British Columbia back in the 1970s for the long discussions we had of what their passions were outside of class time. So it was not what they were teaching in the class, but it was the things they were doing with real data outside of class, which basically inspired some of the techniques which I ended up doing because, hey, they made sense. And in those days, we didn't have computers, so we had to do it ourselves. Um, First HP handheld calculator came out something like 73, 72. I was well through my degree then, or it's my first degree then. And hey, we did. I actually, to be honest, I use an abacus for some of my calculations because it was faster than paper. Okay, so let's go through and take a look. The first thing um, is to, at the beginning of the table, I'm dropping out the probability, PO1, etc., etc., and the number of bacteria which we have identified. And you go and take a look at that, and my initial impression is, wait a minute, most studies identify perhaps 2 or 3 significant bacteria. You're talking about 200, even a p. So how many zeros? One, you get 164. Excuse me, how is this possible? Well, the reason it's possible is one, we have a big reference set. Two, we have a large number of samples. And any statistician knows the bigger the data collection you're working from, the more ability you have to identify things. You can get rid of the noise from the whole thing and you can zero in, which is exactly what I did. Okay, now, the first section I did was average and medians. I did that very intentionally because typically most studies use those averages and calculate significance based on averages, ignoring something called skewness, the fact that the bacteria is way shifted one side or way shifted the other. They assume everything is a nice little bell curve. It's not. And the purpose of showing the average and median is basically to illustrate the situation. Let's take a look at the first one. The average for symptom is 9.813. For reference is 10.96. So it's quite a bit more. But wait a minute. The symptom median, that is the value where 50% or above and 50% below is 9.483. But the reference median is on the other side. So we have average average looking like this, and medians looking like this, which should raise questions about whether or not comparing the averages or medians should really be done. Because, excuse me, um, one way says, oh, you have too much. Another way, you have too little. Both of them are valid statistical numbers. It's the problem is we dealing with skewed data, with data which is not a normal bell curve, and that's where the problem is. That's where you have to do some extra work. So that's basically it. And the first example is absolutely lovely showing it. All my data is available online. You can download it and do the same processing yourself. citizenscience.microbiomeprescription.com, because the data I'm using is open, so anybody can grab it and make use of it and check me out. I encourage you. Convince yourself that what is happening is there, because that will convince you have to change your methods. Okay, now next we get to bacteria incidence. Now, bacteria incidence is connected to averages because because average is computing the average of all those which have reported. But in one case, we have 63% reporting a particular bacteria, and we have 46 in the reference population. And here we had the problem because we have more being reported on one, which is going to skew the average. Whether it skews up or down depends on a variety of factors, but that is what it is. And what I basically did was a real simple. Um, it's a simple chi-square. We would expect these two numbers to be the same. They're not, so you do a chi-square based on the size of the sample, and you quickly end up with a chi-square of 12.4, which is somewhere around p less than 0.001, and we have more of them down there, down below, and everything there is 6.64 or above, and you can see some of them are very significant, and you can see that there's a difference. So the fact that we're seeing the bacteria more often or less often is statistically significant. For example, here, Agrobacter is rarely seen in the symptom, but is very often seen, that almost double there. Other things are not quite as extreme, but sometimes it can be 2 or even 3 times differences between the incidence of one to the other. The incident factors into the medium and the averages. So you may want to review what it means to calculate averages and median, and especially when you have different incidents. Incidence is what you really need to pay a lot greater attention to, and which is often not discussed in PubMed articles during a microbiome, because usually what they do is to do a cop out. The typical cop out is that they will look at ones which have high incidence of 80%, so it's apple to apple. But the thing is, you're missing the rest of the possible trees in your beautiful orchard. You're missing the cherries, you're missing the grapefruit, you're missing the lemons. You're just going for apple to apples, and not just apples to apples, the same species of apples, the same species of apples. So you're missing everything else. Okay, so that goes down there, and again, for simplicity, I just simply grab the top 20. And the next thing is, again, using the chi-square aspect. That is dividing things into a 4 cells and putting the values expected. It's easy to do the chi-square. It is not, repeat, not assuming it's a normal distribution. It is basically parametric. And same thing here. So we go and we find out what the median value is of this particular genus is. And the numbers here I have rounded up. So sometimes you see the same number repeated often. And that's simply because of the round off. And some of these are relatively small occurrence, but it's still there. And we have the odds ratio 2.25. Okay, and now we have chi-square 82.4. Excuse me, that's through the roof. But now here is where what I'm doing is trying to make it clear to you. With this particular symptom, half of those are below this medium, half of them are above, 50-50. But when we look at the reference population, we see 350 are below and only 88 is above. Oh, that is really skewed. As in, wait a minute. The person with symptom is 50-50 above this magic number, but for reference, it is 4-to-1 ratio between those who have higher and those who have lower. In other words, that implies that the typical person with symptom has far more of this particular one, or used far more above the median value than the reference, and go through there. So again, it means calculating the chi-square and their probability easily, and all we're doing is a 2x2 square, popping the numbers, and in this case we only need to show 2 numbers because we're using the medium, so the other 2 numbers in a 2x2 or 4 cell element are identical, same numbers, so we only need to show 2. So we can see the difference here, and we can see often it is in this case, basically everything seems to be much higher or higher amounts over the medium with the condition than below it, all the way down, which is there. Now, we're going for another line in the sand, and this line in the sand is, instead of using the sample, the medium for people with the condition, we're going to use the medium for a reference population. Just another arbitrary line of sight, and you can actually pick any values and do the same thing. So these are not magical numbers. They just happen to be easy numbers to compute to show the results, because we only need to show two numbers, because we know that for the other things, the numbers are even split. So again, we have the same thing, and we can see here we have 0.4, etc., 0.25 here. So we have all of this very dramatic difference of behavior of the bacteria based on a value which is the median value from the reference set. So now I went back through, and because a lot of those bacteria are pretty rare, I went back through and said, okay, give me the ones which occur more often, and just limited to those. So you may not have as high a chi-squared value, but you do end up with a lot more genesis showing up, and the numbers are there. So it's basically just going for high incidence of thing, not the very rarely seen one, but more commonly seen one. And down below we have the same thing for the reference medium, and you see some familiar threads like Streptococcus aureus is there. You can see it's about a 2-to-1 ratio. There, okay, most of those tend to be a little bit of there. So what we end up with is literally 100 different bacteria shift. Now, this is coming from the sample. When we look at an individual, we go and we use this to determine which ones are the significant bacteria. And it won't be 200, it may only be 100, may even just be 50 or max, because a lot of these are rare bacteria. But they're rare bacteria, but if you have them and you have over a certain threshold, that is a big sign that it is a likely cause for it. So we end up with a subset, and now we go over and we say, okay, now, how do we adjust it? Well, the first problem we have is most of these things you will not find a single study showing what influences go up and down. Part of that is simply, I just said, the sloppiness or bad or naive practice of doing statistics on the published study. So the result is the data may be there, they just don't see the data or bother checking for it, which is a real great pain. However, from some other works I did, we end up having the joy of being able to go over and use association, which covers all the bacteria, to figure out which probiotics are likely going to counteract. Whether or not it will counter all or not is hard to say. Let's go over to the site, and we go over here and we have self-declared symptoms. This is using an older way of identifying bacteria. I need to update it for the latest, but it also needs to not use the table I'm using here, but it needs to actually use there, and where do we have histamine and so there. Okay, so this is the same condition we were looking at, and we have here, we see how many, okay, this is very, okay, we see good. Okay, we see here we have 38 bacteria, keyword here, which if the bacterium will shift in the correct direction, and 0 there. And this is not a proven by clinical study. This is by using association, assuming the association applies, because the bacteria which are being associated produces metabolites, and those metabolites are likely the cause of the shift. So we are not definitively not perfect, but it's far better than anything else we have. And we see that, wait a minute, here we have one which improves 69, and that one is a pending bacteria, which is nice. And now we can go and actually start here, and we see a bunch of them, like 167, which is available currently there, and that one impacts 167 positively, 9 negatively. I noticed the numbers we talking about 167. Hey, that's not too far off from what we have. These were calculated by using a different method, which probably I need to compare the methods. But basically, you can see down here, number one, which is available, retail. I know I have some in my fridge. But the adolescent is an easy to one. We get down to 91, etc. And it just gives you the information. So the thing is, we do the same thing, but the catch is this comes from a different lab's data, which is how I generated from it. Now with the new bottom site patterns, I need to create the same type of table or database using bottom site data only, and then we will be able to do the same type of table thing and do it. So that will end up um, being a how we end up doing it. And then once we have done that, we probably go over to our literature, our usual way, and for things where we do have exact matchup with the bacteria one to be shifted, and the clinical literature, we go and do the same way we have done in the past, a bit more stricter, so we're not going to do less inference with that to get additional suggestions. But number one suggestion is going to be probiotics, which is probably far more definitive. And secondary suggestion is based on whatever sparse literally means sparse, I mean sparse data we have on modifying other bacteria. Okay, that's sort of the long and the short of this whole bit of pages. You can see how I'm doing things. You can see that the numbers here, these two numbers all the way here should be the same if there was no relationship. The fact that they are a big difference means that there's a strong relationship. And in this case, this is what chi squared. Oops. Right, that's chi squared. And that is p with a ton of zeros before it, the 1. So it just means, hey, we have a very strong relationship here. The catch is, you won't find any literature on that. However, we can make inferences by using the R squared of bacteria to bacteria, which is what the R2 site is intended on. Okay, I'll shut up. And basically, there's just a bunch of there's a ton of mathematics to do. I know we're talking somewhere around 3 to 4 days of running a contemporary high power, almost gaming quality CPU running for 4 days continuously to get the numbers correct. So there's a number cruncher involved. But once it's done, the tables actually are reasonably easy to interpret. So, okay, that's it. Enjoy.